Good morning, welcome to the Celtic Ways morning briefing. Sean Martin with me, Andy Barge, on an international week, which kind of slows things down a wee bit for us, Sean. There's no game to look forward to this week from a Celtic perspective anyway, but a huge game for Scotland against Israel. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Remember, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter so you get alerts whenever we go online for one of these morning podcasts or whenever we put other things on YouTube, such as the tactical insight videos or maybe clips from interviews and stuff we've done. So thanks for joining us this morning. What we're going to do, myself and Sean, is just have a look through the Celtic squad at the moment and try and see if we can agree or come to some sort of consensus on what Ange Postecoglou's best 11 might be. We're 2 months into the season now in Scotland. He had a busy transfer window, Ange Postecoglou, at least 12 new first-team players arriving, more leaving. So a big turnaround. But I think that we're going to try and see if we can figure out what best 11 really can take Celtic forward. Of course, it's a squad game, Sean, but I think that it's important that managers have some sort of idea of who the main men that they trust are that can go onto the pitch and get a result for them.
Mm-hmm. I think the squad game thing, I think that's reared its head already, that the squad's potentially not there, but the starting 11 when everybody's fit and firing, there's plenty of hope to be had there, I think. I don't know if you agree with that.
In certain positions, certainly, I think so. I absolutely think so. And we'll try and keep this one a bit interactive, so get involved in the comments if you get any concerns or any agreement with what we've said here. So I think we'll start back to front for the best, or Celtic's best 11. I think that's a fairly simple one. Barkas. Okay, well, it's Joe Hart. He's been a good signing for Celtic since he came up the road from West Ham, wasn't it? So
Tottenham.
Tottenham. Sorry, yeah, Tottenham. Absolutely no qualms there. Joe Hart is the best keeper at the club, Sean.
Nobody else for now. I think we all expected them. We're kind of. I think that the big debate was about how we would adjust to maybe being asked to play the ball out from the back. But I think everybody thought, well, he'll bring a presence, a leadership, and I think he's done exactly that. But I think he's also made a string of good and timely saves, even during defeats. I think the fact that he's been given the captain's armband, some depend if your disposition's half full or half empty. Some might think it's because there's a lack of other leaders in the squad, or it might be the fact that he has come in and he has made a difference already and deserved it. I go with the latter. I think he does deserve it. I think he's clearly made an impact. I think he's not quite as bad as what people maybe thought, myself included, at distributing the ball. I think there's been a slight tactical adjustment, so he doesn't need to come quite as far out, but he's still getting up there. And I think the one mistake, the one big clanger, I think that will probably stick, and people says that one against Azed Alkmaar. But even then, I think he didn't let it undermine his performance, and he pulled off a couple of big saves that night as well. So I don't think there's any chance, unless he gets injured, that he's coming out of the team at all this season, really.
Yeah, I think the interesting point in the captain's armband, because I think maybe traditionalists would expect that somebody who captains a team should be maybe a long-term servant or somebody that has the club sort of ingrained in them. But it's not too unfamiliar or uncommon now for somebody to go into a team and immediately take the captain's armband or become one of the leaders. I think Joe Hart's one of those players that commands respect from the rest of the changing room, given what he's achieved throughout his career. Played at 3 major tournaments, won the English Premier League a couple of times with Man City. He's played for some massive clubs, had a spell abroad as well. So, yeah, I don't think that giving him the captain's armband, despite him only being in the door for less than a quarter of a year, is really that too much of a dangerous or a strange call, to be honest. I think that he's the sort of character that can take it in his stride, as we've seen.
No, I'm going to take it as a compliment to Hart rather than a detraction on any of the rest of them, I think.
Yeah, so Hart and goals, probably the easiest one of the 11. Right backs, maybe a bit more contentious. Another new signing came in for that position in the summer, Josip Juranovic, Croatian international, who's probably suffered an injury at a fairly frustrating time for him, just as he was trying to assert himself in the team. Apart from him, you've got Tony Ralston, who has had a bit of a renaissance this season. He was the only right back at the club. Why he was given the chance, that's the reason. But he's not really let Ange Postecoglou or his teammates or the fans down with his performances, and some people would probably rather see him stay in the team because, as a reward for the way he's played this season, rather than Josip Juranovic come straight in. So it is a bit of a difficult one, but I think in terms of best team, are you going for Juranovic?
Yes, I am. I think no harm to Ralston. I think his purple patch was a thing of beauty for a while there. But the Croatia international, he was signed to be first choice, and I think that's what it will be, barring injury. I think Ralston, I've said that a few times over the last couple of months. It certainly has proved me wrong, but he's the biggest compliment I think most people could give him is that even when he signed his new deal, everybody was kind of saying that Celtic need 2 right backs. I think once he started the season and he was kind of dependable in a way that people then started saying, well, maybe it's only one that Celtic need then, and I think that's a big compliment to him. I think in terms of Juranovic, you could say the jury's still out because he's barely played at right back for Celtic so far, really. He's been switched to the left a couple of times already, so I think a run in his proper position should do him the world of good.
Do we know when he'll be fit again, Juranovic?
Last I heard, they said Postecoglou said it would be a couple of weeks longer than what he thought, and obviously at the time we were hoping it was only going to be the next game. So I think after an international break, he'll update on that.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that despite us not being Leisure Warsaw season ticket holders, we haven't seen too much of Juranovic until he came to Celtic. We saw him a wee bit at the Euros in the summer, and I think he's one of those players that and I think that people make this mistake in football often, probably include myself in that at times, where it's safe to assume the quality of someone and then they can come to a new club and not deliver on what their promise really is. But I think it is safe to assume that Juranovic is going to prove himself to be a better player for the club than Ralston. And I do totally agree with you that it's a compliment to Ralston that it was only one right back that Celtic signed, but he is now seen as one of the options, but probably the backup or the spare, really, for when Juranovic is either injured or when the schedule gets particularly busy.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. If we're moving on to the centre backs, I think we should maybe start with the injured one, if you want to put it that way. My first centre back would be Christopher Jullien. Do you agree with that when he's fit?
I actually don't know. I think that there is a true phenomenon in Scotland, and probably football in general, that when a player doesn't play, they get better in the minds of people. And I think because Celtic have struggled with centre halves over the past wee while, that is maybe the case because there's such a desperation for Jullien to come back to fitness. When he was fit, when I watched him, I was never overly impressed by Jullien. I think that he's fine, he's decent, but I don't think he's the presence that his figure and physical capability really suggests he should be. I think he's probably better with the ball at his feet than some people would have expected him to be. But in terms of just being a resolute centre half, I'm not so sure that he's like the saviour when he comes back to fitness. No, I'm not sure. I think maybe he would be in the strongest team, but I'm not sure how much of a cert that would be.
Well, he's obviously been given a couple of torrid times by the likes of Lyndon Dykes, that kind of player. But on the whole, I think he was. I mean, you could argue higher, but I think Jullien, because of his age and his experience as well, was probably Celtic's main centre half, and I think he probably will be if he's fit enough. Again, I think they will have. I mean, you could say between 4 and 6, depending on who you count as a centre back. Centre backs in the team, or in the squad, I should say. But I think he will be first choice when he comes back if he's fit enough. I think he gives a bit of height that the defence doesn't really have at the moment. Also a wee bit of composure that so far Starfelt in particular hasn't showed really. I think he's also a goal threat from set pieces. We all know the League Cup final winner, which might speak to what you said, that was with his foot rather than his head, but still. I think really I think he probably is in the strongest team, and I think it's who partners him that's probably the bigger question for me.
The what, sorry?
Who partners him?
Who partners him?
Yeah.
I think maybe I have a bit of the Dykes game that you're on about there when he lobbed Fraser Forster is probably the main point in the armoury if you're speaking out against Jullien. The thing is that I spent a bit of time covering Kilmarnock over the past couple of seasons, and I saw Nicky Kabamba, Kilmarnock's striker, who was not great, give Jullien a nightmare on 2 occasions. So I don't know, maybe if it was a pitch thing, because Rugby Park and Almondvale both have the plastic pitches, if he felt a bit nervous or something on them. But Jullien on 2 occasions was run ragged by Nicky Kabamba, who was not a great striker, to be honest, for Kilmarnock. And at that point, I remember thinking, Jullien's maybe not all that he's cracked up to be. But I'm sure that when he does come back to fitness, he will be in the Ange Postecoglou's strongest team. I I do think that, yeah. And who partners him? I think that the preference will be Carter Vickers. I think it will be. The jury's certainly still out on Carl Starfelt, and we covered this maybe about a month ago, roughly, when Carl Starfelt was really seemingly struggling to adapt. I think that he's got better on that front, but I'm still not sure that he's an absolute resolute, reliable defender yet. What about you?
The one I've went for Carter Vickers as well. I mean, it is an odd one because he is on loan. I know they've got an option to buy, but he is still just a loanee. Well, the club also obviously paid decent money for Starfelt just in the summer there, so you could argue on that basis he'll be given the chance first. But I think of the two of them, I've been more impressed with Carter Vickers. I think he seems a bit more comfortable on the ball, which is a big thing in this system. It breaks down a couple of times if you're very uncomfortable on the ball. Sometimes Starfelt looks just a bit too panicky, a bit too shaky still. Whether he overcomes that or not, I don't know. It might just not be in his nature. But Carter Vickers seems a wee bit more comfortable on the ball, and he's played a couple of really incisive passes through from centre back to the wingers a couple of times, which bodes well for me as well. So I think I think of the two of them just now, although Starfelt had been purchased, whereas Carter Vickers is a loanee, I would probably give Carter Vickers a nod there.
Is Stephen Welsh disregarded here by us?
He's not disregarded. I just think that it's reverted back to the kind of feeling that we had at the start of the season where he's played himself to be an able deputy kind of role. I thought he might have played himself. You could certainly have made the case he played himself into the team ahead of one or both of those players, but it's clear that the first choice pairing at the moment was Julien out anyway as Carter Vickers and Starfelt. So if we're going on the presumption Julien's coming back in, I doubt he's going to change both of them. But it would be good if Welsh still got his game time when possible. So I don't think it would be nice to see him totally out of the picture.
It's an interesting one. I do concur that Julien, when he's fit and ready, will come back into the team. I really don't know who will partner him. I think it will be Carter Vickers, but again, that just pours fuel over the fire of Celtic's recruitment. If Carl Starfelt, who was at least a £4 million signing, wasn't he, is becoming a backup player. I mean, that's the sort of thing that just helps fan the flames of a situation where the recruitment is being criticised, I suppose.
I don't think you need to fan any more flames about the recruitment, to be honest. I think it's there for all to see that there's problems in that area. I think there has been for a couple of seasons now. You only had to look at last season when they ended the season with 3 out of the main 4 defenders as loanees, which was not conducive to anything towards European qualifiers that were coming round, even though the manager was leaving and stuff. But I think you've also, it says you've got between 4 and 6 defenders. If you count Nir Beaton as a centre back, that's one. But you've also got Liam Scales, who has said he prefers centre back, although we'll probably come on to it in the next position that his best avenue into the team might be not there. but you have got, and again, this is where it comes down to the quantity doesn't necessarily equal quality. Like there's 32, I think, first team players listed on Celtic's first team section on the website, but realistically, you saw what a couple of injuries to key players done to the depth problem. It's about the quality of players that can step in and play rather than the number that you've got there.
Yeah. Well, let's go to left back then. There are, I'd say, 4 options probably for Celtic. Taylor's injured just now. Bolingoli, how do you count him? I know he played against Livy, but he's far out the picture. We've actually got a piece going up this week about Bolingoli and his alleged second chance that's gone without coming. So we'll include him anyway. So Bolingoli, Greg Taylor, and then you have Liam Scales and also young Montgomery, who's been playing there recently on a couple of occasions. So yeah, goes back to the quantity v quality thing you were just saying there, Sean. I mean, there's 4 options. What one for you is the best one?
You could variously say they've got 1 or 5, I think, because when Taylor was fit, he's the first choice. I think he will be when he's fit again. But you've also got to add into that, obviously, we've mentioned that Juranovic played left back as well for a while there, so it's like it could be between 1 or 5, really, depending on what way you think about it. But I think Taylor obviously doesn't enjoy a flawless reputation among Celtic fans, but I think he's capable, and I think he's actually been missed somewhat in his absence. I think there's obviously concerns, and there will be when he's back, that opposition can target his flank with long high balls and fast wingers to get in behind. But I think that will also be a concern Juranovic at right back as well. I think Taylor was adapting better than I expected to the inverted fullback stuff, and is generally, I think, just a bundle of energy about the left that I think they've missed. So I think it will be him in the strongest team, and I think it would be deservedly so.
What about Bolingoli? I'll make a point to you that Celtic have had a massive overhaul in a lot of departments. The playing staff, new manager, new CEO came in and is gone. So loads of things have changed at Celtic, but since Bolingoli's trip to Spain during the lockdown. But he's been given one game since then against Livy. Celtic got beat. Nobody was great that day, I think. But I don't think Bolingoli stood out as the absolute worst. I'm surprised that he's gone from that to then being out of the next two squads. Now, we don't have any spies or sources at Lennoxtown. We don't know what his attitude's like at training or if he even gets on with Postecoglou. But he had a good loan spell over in Istanbul. Played 6 Champions League games for them at a good level. Was part of a team that beat Man United. So I'm confused as to why there seems to be a reluctance on the manager's part to include him, unless he's injured. But that would be some helpful clarity for the Celtic fans if he's not fit. Because to have him just wasting away in the sidelines is a bit confusing, because in my opinion, I think a second chance is probably worthwhile.
I was confused that he was in the team against Livingston at all after being exiled for so long. I mean, he was on the bench a couple of times, but then I think you've got to look at... I was just surprised that Montgomery didn't start that day, because as Ed, when Taylor got injured, Bolingoli was on the bench. It was still the qualifiers, and it was still Montgomery that Postecoglou turned to come on, and I thought that spoke volumes. And then obviously Montgomery, for the game at Ibrox, it was Juranovic that came in instead of Montgomery, so it still wasn't Bolingoli. So for him to get in against Livingston was a surprise. I agree with you. I don't think he'd done badly. I think it was fine. And I think there's probably, if you look at it analytically, I think he's probably got decent attributes that could contribute. But it's more confusing just that he came in for that one game, then he's been out again, rather than just not being in.
Yeah.
But I think the fact he's not been seen since probably suggests that it is Montgomery that's the backup left back.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. The being left out of the Europa squad was, I think, the nail in the coffin for Bolingoli, considering the other options with Taylor's injury as well. So with Montgomery being selected there recently, yeah, I would say that it's probably Taylor as first choice, and then Montgomery as backup. And we'll see what happens with Scales. But in terms of the strongest 11 that we feel could go out there on the park for Celtic, I would certainly have Bolingoli. While he's on the payroll, I would certainly have him near the top of the list, to be honest.
I think with Scales, I always see a lot of people saying to start Scales. I don't know. I didn't watch Shamrock Rovers that much. It was only when we were doing the scouting stuff for Scales. He does look as if he's versatile. He can play a part if he's up to the kind of speed of up to the level of the Scottish game. Because let's not kid on, it's not a step up. Sorry, it is a step up. But his only appearance today has been on the left for that last half hour against Wraith. So he performed ably, but there's only so much you can read into that. Wraith offered very little, so it does in turn it suggests very little about how capable he is to start there for now. But I think that is probably his best avenue to get in the team, given the centre-back discussion we've just had.
Yeah, probably. Probably true. We'll move into midfield. I think this depends on who you prefer as the two ahead of the midfield anchor, because Turnbull and Rogic have had that pretty much sewn up, but then it was McGregor there at the weekend alongside David Turnbull with Nir Bitton as the anchor. So I suppose we'll start with Callum McGregor, because he's going to play. He's one of the best players in the league, never mind the Celtic team. Where in midfield do you prefer him? And then we can build around that.
Well, I've just kind of went centre mid 1, centre mid 2, centre mid 3, and then McGregor's obviously centre mid 1. He's going to play, of course, he is. But I think whether it's the deepest or whether it's slightly further forward, probably for me depends on the opposition and the players alongside him. But either way, he's going to start. I think that's a given. I think alongside him is going to be Turnbull more often than not. I think it's clear that Postecoglou's kind of earmarked him as his main creative midfielder, given that if there has been one to drop out between him and Rogic, it's been Rogic. But I think it's the other berth, whether it's Rogic or whether it's McCarthy, Soro or Beaton, really, that will dictate whether McGregor's the one sitting deepest or slightly further forward. I think actually this is when you see the kind of absence of the likes of Ryan Christie leaving that hits home there, because you shouldn't really be starting David Turnbull and Tom Rogic together. I don't think most weeks. I think you can get away with it against kind of weaker opposition in the league at home and stuff. But I think at European level, it probably leaves a lot to be desired. I think that's where you see that Celtic miss a guy at a box to box midfielder, the likes of Christie, that can fill in the kind of holes that's there. And in that respect, I think it's an odd area of the park.
Do you know it's strange? I was watching Match of the Day at the weekend, and they did a wee feature on Ruben Loftus-Cheek. I'm not advocating that Celtic try and sign him because they simply couldn't, right? But that sort of midfielder, I thought that is what Celtic would really need. So if McGregor was the deepest, then Turnbull ahead on the right, and then somebody on the left, somebody that can get box to box, but is a physical specimen, can carry the ball, can do their duty defensively as well. And I think that is exactly the sort of midfielder, just an imposing centre mid that opposition don't want to come up against or is going to give them a hard time. And it's weird because I actually totally forgot about Loftus-Cheek, and then all of a sudden Thomas Tuchel's given him a couple of games, and the way that he carries the ball forward is amazing. For such a big guy, it's hard for opposition to get anywhere near him, and I think that somebody like that in the Celtic team would work wonders, to be honest. So for me, I'm saying if Celtic had a player like that, I would like to see McGregor as the anchor and Turnbull as the other midfielder. But right now, without that kind of player, I think that it's got to be McGregor and Turnbull as the further two forward ones, and either McCarthy or Baton just behind them.
I think the kind of role that you said there for Loftus-Cheek, that is fine, like having the guy that can do the kind of physical stuff, but he has got to be good enough with the ball at his feet as well, which is where it kind of falls down for a couple of ones with Celtic so far, like McCarthy and Soro, albeit McCarthy's still early days, so you don't know what he's going to be like, maybe playing alongside McGregor rather than instead of him. But I think with Soro, it's probably the kind of impact sub role to inject a bit of energy into midfield is probably closer to how I think he'll be utilised going forward, because he came on a couple of games and did inject energy and did actually look not bad in that kind of role. I don't necessarily think it looks like he's going to be able to start that often. I think Beaton finally get a game back in midfield after a couple of years. Could be a decent option to sit sometimes at the base, but I think it's really a box to box guy that he feels missing in there.
Yeah. If there's anyone from recent times, I would say that, and I know that he's certainly more attacking than he was defensive, but he had the engine to get from the 18-yard box to the 18-yard box, and he would drive with the ball, would be Armstrong. I would really have liked to have seen Stuart Armstrong have a crack with this setup ahead of McGregor or alongside McGregor with the holder just behind them. I think that he's the sort of driving force that this Celtic midfield would do well with at the moment.
Aye, I could give it that. I think, as I say, Christie, for me, I think would have done it. I think would have gave Postecoglou options. He could rotate him in, rotate him out. I think not having a box to box midfielder to replace him was arguably the biggest drawback of the recruitment.
Yeah, but are you saying that your preferred one right now is McGregor deepest with Rogic and Turnbull?
It depends on the opposition. As I say, in Europe, it probably isn't going to work against the kind of tougher teams in Scotland. It might not work either. But I think at home, big pitch against the kind of the weaker teams, especially if Celtic score early, I think they can wreak all sorts of havoc. But ideally, one of those, probably Rogic would be on the bench as a game changer, a genuine game changer, as he was at the weekend against Aberdeen. Ideally, that would be the scenario for me.
Here's a question that's been coming in a couple of times in the comments. Frank Brennan, thanks for joining us. He's saying, with all that in mind, could Welsh be tried out in midfield until maybe January at least? Do you see any midfield role for Welsh or a benefit to the team in that regard?
I can see where he's coming from in terms of the attributes that he's got, Welsh. And he did play right back when he was on loan at Morton and stuff, like, so he is a wee bit better with the ball at his feet than perhaps you'd assume for a centre back. But just based on the personnel there, I don't see Postecoglou trying him in centre mid. But you never know.
Would that be as one of the midfielders ahead of the anchor, or as with Welsh as the anchor?
I think correct me if I'm wrong, Frank, but I think what Frank's saying is like the power that he's got to carry the ball and stuff and that kind of thing. But I just don't see it happening. I can see where he's coming from with the attributes, but I just don't see it. I just don't think it will happen.
I always felt that watching Celtic Christopher Ayer would have been worth a shot in that position, and it never happened because he was signed as a midfielder, wasn't he?
Well, he was. I was going to say he was a midfielder originally, but.
All right, well, that's the midfield tied up. For the record, I would say that it would be better for Celtic to have McGregor slightly further ahead. So that means either Baton or McCarthy as the holder, and Turnbull as the other midfielder. So onto the wings now. This is probably an interesting one. I think we can agree Jota is the first choice left winger. Yep. On the right, Forrest or Abada?
For me, it's Forrest. I think I kind of touched on it yesterday. I think you got to remember he. I know Abada's played well, but I actually think the wingers. I'm happy to caveat it with the fact that there's a versatility to it and that they could switch wings. But I think when fit, I think Forrest will be back to first choice. I think just his lack of availability has been a big miss because it means you've got to play the two kind of relatively inexperienced wingers every week. I think you could actually argue Jota has done slightly better when he's been wide right than wide left, but I think he probably will be wide left coming in, hitting a shot or even cutting outside and crossing. But I think Jota and Abada, they could potentially rotate, and they could rotate with Forrest or with each other, because Forrest, obviously, you don't necessarily want to be knocking his pan in twice a week when he comes back from injury. His lack of availability last season was a big miss, and it has been, I think, this season as well. Even though I think we'd all agree that he wasn't at his best before he got injured this season, he still had 2 goals and 3 assists in 7 games. So I think when he comes back, he will be first choice, and I think it's good to have options. And the fact Abada and Jota have both started so well will be only a benefit to Postecoglou.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting as well to see if Kyogo Furuhashi is regarded more as a centre forward or a winger as well to challenge Jota on the left for that position and give Giakoumakis one of the starting bursts through the middle. But I think that the evidence that we've seen so far suggests that Furuhashi's a centre forward, isn't he, on the last shoulder?
I think again it's good to have options, but I would rather see Kyogo through the middle. There might be games, depending on the fixtures and stuff, where Kyogo maybe shifts wide left, gives Giakoumakis a game and stuff, and that's fine. But I still think more often than not, most people would rather see Kyogo through the middle, including himself.
Yeah, with a fair point. Let me just find the comment.
It's going to be the one I've just saw there about. About
the injured fellas. So Forrest, we've recognised coming back to fitness, but Mikey Johnston and Dembele can't catch a break. Those two, Mikey Johnston especially, I suppose he's more of a left winger. Dembele, as far as I'm aware, is more of a right winger. So the pool is not as shallow as it was a few months ago, but those guys need to get fit really before they can be considered whatsoever.
I think so. You wrote a piece on Mikey Johnston's injury and how unfortunate the timing was and stuff for the latest one, or the second latest one. But I think his injury record so far makes him just an unreliable option to count on, if you know what I mean. You'd need to prove that prove his reliability before you really counted him as a regular contributor. I think with Karamoko, his was an unfortunately timed injury as well in pre-season, because Postecoglou had singled him out in pre-season and said that he didn't see a reason to hold him back from first team football, and that he liked the style that he would bring to the team, and then he get injured. So whether he gets back in the squad and when that is actually intriguing. I'm intrigued to see how he would use him if he does.
So up front then, Jota the left, Furuhashi through the middle, and I would agree with you that Forrest on the right, although it is harsh on Abada because he's slotted in seamlessly, really. But I think that Forrest is the man for the right winger position until he's unfit or horrendously out of form for Celtic. Yeah,
I think so. I'd agree with that. I think you've also got the likes of new signings, Giakoumakis and stuff on the bench that you would hope would contribute, whether they're starting or coming on. But I mean, I've seen a couple of comments about the kind of midfield that we were talking about, and just in general with the team and the kind of like a fighting spirit, I suppose you could say, which I don't really like getting at that because it makes people sound as if they're not trying. But one thing I was talking about this with my uncle the other day was that you notice when Celtic are a wee bit light in terms of the kind of the presence that they've got, but they obviously try to play the football, but that means you get kicked. But what I've noticed the last few weeks is there's a lot of people like Scott Brown and who that would go up and like chin someone for kicking one of the kind of better players. And all that. So as much as we're talking about personnel, I'd kind of like to see that. I'm more of an attitude as well when it comes to that.
the consensus in the comments seems to be, and from you and I as well, to be fair, that box-to-box midfielder in January should be the priority, really. And then that adds a bit more depth to the midfield, but also somebody that can come in and grab it by the scruff of the neck.
Just to have a wee bit of a presence as well. And again, I don't want to go into that too much because it makes it sound as if that's all that matters, and it's not. Or James McCarthy would have been the man of the match the last couple of times he's played. You've got to have the quality to go with it, but that wee aggressive streak wouldn't go amiss.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, well, that settles that, really. I think we kind of were on the same wavelength for most of it. I think we disagree slightly with the way that the midfield can be shaped up best, and maybe there's one slight difference at centre-half, but no, overall, good chat, Sean. And remember, everyone tuning in, thanks for joining us. You can subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on Twitter, and that means you'll get a notification whenever we go live with one of these morning podcasts. And you can also sign up to the website. At the minute, we've got a special offer going, so you can subscribe, or you can see the ticker going along the bottom of your screen at the moment. Subscribe to the Celtic Way for only £1 a month, and that'll last you till December. Cracking offer, and we've got all these sort of things with long read interviews, tactical deep dives. Sean, you get right stuck into them, and different stuff like that. So yeah, feel free, and absolutely thank you for joining us.